You know that feeling, right? Where you just can't. It's not about being lazy. It's not even just about being tired. It's this deep, deep exhaustion that's become so common. We all know the word for it, burnout. But this isn't just some buzzword people throw around. It's a real, widespread experience, and we really need to get what's going on. So let's dig in and figure it out together. All right, let's start with a phrase that I think perfectly captures this whole feeling of modern burnout. I can't even. So what does can't even really mean? Well, author Anne Helen Peterson puts it perfectly. She says it's a state of being so emotionally overwhelmed that you literally are unable to process or deal with things. It's that breaking point when your ability to just cope is completely gone. Now, just take a second and really think about that definition. Why does that feeling of being totally maxed out, completely and utterly overwhelmed, why does that feel so familiar to so many of us right now? Well, it feels familiar because it's not just a feeling. Burnout has massive, and I mean massive, real-world consequences. A Gallup estimate puts the cost to businesses at $322 billion a year, just in lost productivity. So yeah, this is not just in our heads. It's a huge economic issue. To really get to the heart of this, we have to look back. I mean, way back. The burnout that so many millennials and Gen Z are feeling today, it's actually rooted in a generational story, a story about being raised and prepared for a world that, by the time they actually got there, had completely vanished. Just look at this timeline here. A lot of millennial parents, the boomers, they grew up in a time of incredible post-war growth and stability. But then, by the 70s and 80s, you see this anxiety starting to creep in as industries stagnated. Then came the 90s with a rise in individualism, and then, bam, 2008. The Great Recession just completely shattered that whole idea of a stable, predictable economic future. And this slide right here really shows the huge disconnect that created. Boomer parents raised their kids on the boomer dream playbook. Work hard, get a degree, land a stable job, buy a house. But millennials stepped into a totally different world. A reality of unstable gig work, soul-crushing student debt, and housing that's just out of reach. The path they were told to follow just didn't lead where it was supposed to. And this fear of their kids falling behind had a huge effect on how they were raised. As Peterson points out, middle-class boomers, just wanting the best for their kids, basically steered them away from a relaxed childhood and into this super-organized, highly planned existence. They were essentially being trained to win a game, but the rules of that game were changing before they even got a chance to play. So, you have a generation that was raised to believe that hard work is the absolute key to success. But what happens when the workplace itself seems designed to break that very promise? And that brings us to the system of modern work. There was this really powerful idea that came out of a Reddit discussion suggesting burnout isn't just about working long hours. It's about something called broken feedback loops. These are systems where the connection between the effort you put in and the results you see is, well, it's weak, or sometimes it's not even there at all. And what does that actually look like in real life? Well, it's when promotions are about office politics, not how well you do your job. It's when you're measured on metrics that don't actually matter. It's when the goals change so often that success starts to feel completely random. When your hard work doesn't lead to clear, predictable results, your motivation just disappears. But this goes even deeper. The argument is that the real, fundamental problem is a system that's built to value profit above everything else, often at the expense of its own employees, its customers, and even the environment. And it's this basic misalignment that lets all those broken feedback loops grow and thrive. In this big systemic problem, it creates a very personal, very real feeling of being completely trapped. Research from the University of Georgia on student loan debt found this exact thing. People feel stuck in a system where they did exactly what they were told to do, get a degree, but now they're just drowning in debt without that high-paying job they were promised. Okay, so we've got a generational disconnect and a broken work system. But there's one more layer to this whole thing, the clash between our modern work culture and our own brains. This is a huge deal for neurodivergent individuals. People whose brains just process information a little differently, which can include things like ADHD or autism. And this is where hustle culture comes in. It's this whole philosophy that glorifies ridiculously long hours and being available 24/7. And while that kind of relentless pressure is tough for anyone, it creates some really unique and often invisible struggles for neurodivergent workers. Now, I know this looks complicated, but it's basically a model for a productivity system that's actually aware of neurodiversity. See, it's got feedback loops and adaptive parts designed to adjust to how a person's brain actually works. The problem is, most of our current work systems are the total opposite. They are rigid, one size fits all, and they assume there's only one right way for a brain to work, which creates a constant battle for anyone who doesn't fit that mold. I mean, think about it. The very tools that are supposed to help us be more productive, to-do lists, calendars, all those project management apps, can actually become huge sources of overwhelm for people with conditions like ADHD. Instead of helping, they can lead to task paralysis and just deep, crushing fatigue, making the whole burnout cycle even worse. So, we've looked at the generational promises, the realities of the modern workplace, and the cognitive pressure. Now, let's connect all the dots. And this right here really gets to the core of it all. The problem isn't that a generation is broken or has failed. As Peterson argues, it's the system itself that has failed. From this perspective, burnout isn't some glitch in our society. It's actually a built-in feature. So here's the journey laid out in 4 simple steps. First, you're raised for a stable world that just doesn't exist anymore. Second, you step into a system where your effort and your rewards are totally disconnected. Third, you're hit with a culture that demands constant mental energy from you. And the result of all that widespread collective exhaustion we started with, that feeling of, I just can't even. And that leaves us with one final, and I think really crucial question. If burnout isn't a personal failing that we can fix with more self-care or a better planner, if it's actually a systemic problem, then what on earth do we change first?